the UK Talent Trends breakout session. We'll be delving into the report a little bit further during this session. It is an interactive session, so please do turn on your video cameras if you can and join in the discussion. You always get more out of it if you put more into it, so it's a real opportunity to ask questions of each other, make suggestions and discuss your own experiences as well, so please do really join in. Pop yourselves on mute just to help remove any background noise, and then when you do want to come in, please do raise your hand using the function on the toolbar. This will highlight your box yellow and let us know that you do want to come in to speak, and make sure we don't miss anybody out. And to continue with the networking, please do share your LinkedIn details in the chat box as well. And that's another place for you to pop in any questions if you're unable to come on camera or speak out loud. But yeah, enjoy the session. Please do make the most of it. And I'll hand over to Joe, who's leading the session. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Hi, everyone. My name is Joe Fitzsimons, and I'm part of our Policy and Insights team at ACCA. And I'm the author of our UK Talent Trends report, which I'll be sharing a run through of in just a moment. So I'm just going to get my slides up on the screen and hope that the technology does its magic. So let me just let's see if they let me do that. It's actually not allowing me to share. Amanda, would it be possible for me to?
I've got a copy. Let me see if they work for me.
Thanks. So our UK Talent Trends is really the cut of the global picture that Jamie discussed with the panel just now, and we had over 600 responses in the UK, which is really excellent response rate for us to be able to dive into some of the color in there. Oh, excellent. Thank you, Amanda. I will get those up on the screen now. So hopefully they are loading for you all. Be quite interesting to discuss the technology bit of this now that we have these. Okay, I think that's loading up. Can everyone see the slides? Great. So I'll get straight into the color here. So there are 6 at a glance priorities in our UK talent trends. The first is around inflation and the inflation impact on people's real wages and the pressure that we're seeing there. And number 2 is on hybrid working gaining traction in the UK. And the UK is in fact the most popular destination globally for hybrid working, and Scotland actually was the most popular out of the UK when we look at it by nation. Mobility driving a potential talent crunch. Number 4 was about addressing burnout needing to be a priority. Number 5 is technology and how people are a little bit concerned about the impact of technology, but it does support delivering enhanced value through to clients and organizations. And number 6 is on inclusivity measures scoring well, but social mobility still lagging behind and still plenty of work to do on that front. So in terms of the demographics in the UK, we had a larger proportion of female respondents. We had good coverage from all generations, and that's something we'll be looking to balance out even further in the forthcoming edition of this research. In terms of sectors, we had respondents from across all sectors. And in terms of that working pattern, and this is a piece that I'll be diving into in more detail during the presentation. As I say, the UK, only 1 in 5 were fully office based, 80% were either fully remote or working in a hybrid way. So in terms of the first priority area, what I'm going to do is just run through all 6 and give you some more of the color in terms of the data, but I'd really value any questions or comments or reflections, observations that you have about any of this as we move through. As Amanda says, it'd be great to have you input, so please do share any comments in the chat or questions, and we can come to those at the end, and we can have a bit of a chat about it towards the end. So this particular graphic here, if you look at the far right hand side, you'll see the UK, and the red line is inflation impacting on people's real wage. So it was actually the leading concern in the UK, but it was consistently high across all of the regions you see across that chart there. If you track the red line across, so this is something that we're seeing around the world, but was equally high in the UK. This is where we can see the sort of sector breakdown when we look at some of those factors. And you can see the sectors across the top and the areas across the side. So inflation was the leading issue across all, but the big four accountancy respondents, where it was still very high, but not quite the leading one. Resources and workload was the leading issue there. Section 2 is on hybrid working. So this here shows us sort of how the UK compares with the global picture. So the fully office-based proportion of each of the three charts here is the blue. And in the global one, you can see it's 57%, only 20% in the UK, and actually only 13% in Scotland were fully office-based. The large majority across the UK and Scotland were working in a hybrid way, but also a notable sort of chunk working in a fully remote or home-based way at 16 in the UK and 13% in Scotland as well. And then if we look at sort of the demographics in terms of the age group and how this works across different age groups. So again, on here, the fully office-based is the blue line. And you'll see that actually, in terms of the highest proportion of home working, that was across the Gen Z respondents, those under the age of 25. So that they were most in favor of being fully office based, and that dropped as you move through the generations. And the opposite is actually true when we look at hybrid working. That was lowest for Gen Z, but moves up across Gen Y and consistently high across all of the other areas. And a similar picture there with the fully remote and home-based working. So you'll note a couple of quotes there from some of our UK roundtable participants, but it's really interesting to just see how that's working in practice. And there's potentially different reasons for this. It may be that some of those in Gen Z have a directive if they're perhaps graduates or recent joiners in the organization to come to the office, but it is interesting to see how that changes across the age categories there. On this particular slide, so I won't go through sort of all the stats on here, but if you look at the top left, you'll see 83% agree that they would like to work remotely at least one day a week. And if you look at the bottom right hand side, only 28% feel more disengaged from their manager when working remotely. So we see relatively positive attitudes towards remote working in the UK. And this is likely one of the driving factors for it being so much more popular in the UK than we see in the global data. But what's even more interesting is if we look at this by gender. So again, in the top left, you'll see 85% of females agree that they'd like to work remotely at least one day a week in the future. That drops to 82% for males. In the bottom right, that 26% of females feel more disengaged from their manager. That increases to 30% of male respondents feeling more disengaged from their manager when working remotely. So across all of the charts here, particularly if we look at the bottom left-hand side there, in terms of female respondents, 85% feel more productive working remotely. That drops to 67% for male respondents. So we see much more positive attitudes towards remote working and hybrid working in female respondents when compared with male respondents in the UK. So just a really interesting thing for us to note when we're looking at the analysis of the data. Section 3 is on mobility driving a potential talent crunch. So this particular chart shows us a few different things. You can see 63% of those planning on moving are seeking promotion. 17% are seeking a sideways move, and the rest have no preference. 48% are looking externally, 37% are looking internally. But in the top left there, you've got the chart which shows the proportion of people planning on moving. And quite strikingly, actually, a very small proportion are not planning on moving, which is 22%. 36% are looking to move in the next 12 months, and an additional 22% in the next 2 years. So if you combine that, you have 58% of people looking to move within 2 years of today, which is really quite significant when we consider the fact that almost half of those are looking for external moves, and a large proportion are looking for promotion. So we see really high expectations from individuals within the profession in terms of what they would like to do and their mobility options. And for this reason, we wanted to dive into satisfaction issues and satisfaction factors across both hybrid and remote workers. And what's really interesting here is for those working in a fully office-based environment, which is on the left-hand side, you'll note that across all of those factors, the vast majority of those factors, there's a lower level of satisfaction when compared with workers who work in a hybrid way. So in terms of job security, those working in a hybrid way, almost three quarters, 74%, say that they're satisfied with their job security. When we look at fully office-based workers, only 65% report that same satisfaction with job security. And you can track that all the way through the various different factors on there. So we see a real sort of positive impact of that increased flexibility, you might say, in terms of satisfaction rates amongst employees, which actually may in turn have a knock-on effect on the ability of an organization to retain that talent and to attract that talent in the first place. This particular slide shows us, in terms of that mobility, where people are seeking to move from and to. So down the left-hand side, you'll see all of the regions people were based in when they responded globally. And on the right-hand side, you've got where they're planning to move. And the really great news here is that the UK was actually the most popular global destination, with 20% of those planning on moving geographically seeking to move to England, which is really, really excellent. And of course, to other parts of the UK as well. We are moving through quite quickly, and these last sections won't take me quite as long, so it'd be really great to get into the discussion here. But number 4 is on addressing burnout, needing to be a priority. So again, we've got some different data points here. So on the top left-hand side, 72% agree that they would like a better work-life balance. 54% agree that they feel that their mental health suffers because of work pressure. 41% say that they would like more support from their organization in managing mental health, and almost a third, 31%, don't believe that their organization considers mental health to be a priority. So quite a lot of concern there when we think about mental health. And mental health on this particular chart is the red line. So if you track that across, you'll see it's in place number 2 for UK on the far right-hand side. And that red line remains consistently high, not as consistent as we saw with the inflation earlier, but it is consistently high across a large number of the regions on there in terms of how high a priority it is for people. And we have some really good color when we look at the sector analysis on this, but again, it actually remains, in terms of those who say it suffers because of work pressure, it remains quite consistently high, dropping slightly for those in academia to a slightly lower point, but it is consistently high across the sectors. On technology, 63% say that they would like their employer to provide them with more training. Over a third would like, if are concerned about the pace of technology and how it might replace part or all of their role. And 23% agree that they are overwhelmed with the impact and the pace of change when we think about technology. So there is an acceptance here that technology can enhance value and help people do their role in a more efficient or in a better way, so to speak. But there is concern about what might happen there, and some of that is around the AI piece that we heard a little bit about during the panel discussion. And again, if we look at the sector-based analysis, interestingly, those in big four accounting firms are actually the most concerned that technology will replace part or all of their role, and that's all the way up at 63%. Those in mid-tier accounting firms, it's considerably lower at 24%, but it is consistently a concern across all the sectors there. And in terms of feeling overwhelmed, again, those in big four accounting firms find the pace of change to be the most overwhelming, but it is consistently high across financial services and academia as well. And the last section I've got to share some data on is about inclusivity. So the good news here is that the picture in the UK is a little bit more positive than in other parts of the world when we look at the profession, but there is still a lot of work to do. So in terms of people finding leaders in their organization to be accessible, 72% of people agree with that. 3/4 of people believe that leaders have integrity within their organization, and about the same proportion feel that their organization culture is inclusive. However, the concerning stat here is in the bottom right hand side. 32% believe that a low socioeconomic background is actually a barrier to progression within their organization. So that's really quite concerning, and certainly something for us to continue to work on, and to keep at the front of our mind, and something we're planning on doing a lot more sort of investigation around in terms of the forthcoming edition of this particular UK talent trends research. But as I say, the good news is that if you look at the UK and how it compares on that social mobility piece with other parts of the world, 32%, it's the far right hand side, 32% agree that a low socioeconomic background is a barrier to progression within the organization, but that is a smaller proportion than we see across the vast majority of other parts of the world. It's the same as the India proportion, but outside of that, it's actually a smaller proportion than all the other regions. So that is something for us to reflect on as well, and perhaps some lessons learned in terms of what we do in the UK and how that might be applied across other parts, other regions of the world. So that takes me to the end of the more slightly more formal sort of running through of our results, and sharing the data for the UK picture. I can't see the chat just now, but if there are any questions or reflections or areas that anyone would like me to circle back to, I'd be very happy to do that. But it would also just be really interesting to hear how this is working in your own organizations in terms of that hybrid working piece, and any of the other work that might be going on. Would be really great to get your reflections. So over to you, really. I can see there's a question about the slides. So the slides are available. What's perhaps even more helpful is the all of the data within these slides is available in our UK Talent Trends report, and so that will be available to everyone after the call. And it has a lot more narrative and a lot more of the sort of anecdotal quotes coming through from some of the research and the roundtables that we did. Val, I can see you've got your hand up.
Hi, I just want to think about more about this mobility being a crunch on talent. I think it's point number 3. That's one I'm still playing around in my mind. So can you just fill out that one a little bit more?
Of course, yeah. So
Sort of longer term as opposed to now, what that means for me as a leader.
absolutely. I think it's one of the really striking things in the data, both in the UK and globally, on that particular piece was around people's tenure. So what we noted was that certainly in the UK, almost 2/3 of people were seeking to move within the next 2 years. And what we're interested in doing here actually is seeing how this evolves over time. So this was the first iteration of this particular research, but we'll be asking that question again in the forthcoming survey, which will be going out in October of this year. But I think it's really around what we're interested in understanding is, are there sort of significant generational differences? We didn't really find any in this particular edition in terms of, we saw a lot of sort of mobility across all age groups, and also what other factors might have an impact on some of that mobility. So we did see that there were higher levels of satisfaction amongst across lots of different factors for those working in a hybrid way compared with those in a fully office-based environment. So there seems to be some kind of link there in terms of people's satisfaction and their sort of desire to move organization. But there was also one of the priorities coming through was also around progression and opportunities for development. So people definitely ranked those as being very important. And so again, we're just keen to explore whether there's a clear link there in terms of progression opportunities, development opportunities, and people's desire to move organization, and whether they're looking internally or externally for promotion. But I think it's really just that piece around tenure that was quite striking for us, was that people really were seeking to move in the not so distant future in a large majority of cases.
So I'm challenging the thought around it's a talent crunch, because it feels like it's the same pool of talent, it's just moving around, and that might actually be an advantage, because you're bringing like different experiences into different organizations, which could be rich. So I'm wondering if it is more, so when we think about a talent crunch, is that, do we have the pipeline? As you say, you know, people want to progress, so do we have the pipeline coming in at the bottom? So so it was just that, why is there a talent crunch for it? Because actually we've got talent moving around. But okay, thank you.
That's a very helpful reflection. Thank you, Val. We'll certainly kind of bear that in mind as we're moving through the next edition. Yeah, really great thought. Thank you.
Joe, Yogesh here. I have a question. So
Hi.
first of all, thank you so much for sharing the data. I think what I reflect back, when I reflect back on my organization, the data is in line with what I see in my organization, right? My question is around going forward. Do you see right now, as you showed in one of your slides, 20% of the UK population are still working from office, and the rest of them are either hybrid or fully remote working. Do you see a shift happening in that space where more and more people are moving towards office work rather than hybrid or remote working?
Sorry, could I just clarify your question? You mentioned sort of.
Is there a shift happening where more and more people are, or more organizations are asking their employees to come to office and work from office? So
I see what you're saying. Yes. Thank you very much. I think that it's a really interesting question. So it's not something that we actually measured through the data itself in terms of what the organizations are, employing organizations are sort of seeking to achieve. But one of the things that we definitely did pick up on through our sort of roundtable discussion with employers and with different groups was there's when we talk about productivity. So I shared some data that looked at that productivity for people and how productive they feel when they're working remotely or in a hybrid way. The interesting thing was that there was definitely a bit of a gap between how productive individuals that wanted to work remotely felt that they were, and perhaps how productive some of the employers felt that those members of the workforce were. So there's a small gap there. I think the other thing that was quite interesting was around people and how disengaged they felt from their managers. So again, we didn't see sort of particularly high levels of concern around feeling disengaged with people's managers, but actually for managers there was a slightly different message coming through anecdotally from some of the discussions we were having, to say that it can be a little bit more challenging for some groups. So perhaps for some of those at an earlier stage in their career, so if they're just coming through from full-time education, or if it's one of their first sort of full-time roles, that some of that more informal guidance and mentorship that people can receive by being in an office-based environment, that missing element can actually cause a little bit of friction and make it a little bit more challenging. So we haven't really gathered data that specifically sort of looks at what employers are seeking to achieve, but I think what we are picking up on is a little bit of a disconnect between or a gap between sort of the employer sentiment and the employee sentiment on some of this stuff. But as Jamie pointed out earlier, I think the interesting thing on that is actually there was some of that work that Microsoft did last year, which actually shows that in most cases, or overall, those working in a hybrid or remote way were actually more productive than those working in an office-based environment. So there's a lot to unpick really, but it's a really interesting area, and it's something we'd like to we'll probably look to again examine this in a little bit more depth when we go through the forthcoming edition this year.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Yogi. Any other questions or reflections or thoughts? I'm mindful it's actually quite a lot of data when you try to run through it all at once. So if there are any further thoughts or reflections that come through when you leave the call and you've had a look at the actual report, please do feel free to reach out to us. We'd be very happy to get back to you with any kind of answers or questions that you have following on from this.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joe. That's really illuminating some of those statistics. Can't even say it this morning. I'm going to stop saying that word. But it was, yeah, it was really insightful. I'm sure it was give everybody a lot of food for thought. So do take that back to your own organisations. You know, it's really useful to have these reports to be able to put your case forward when you're talking to other people within your business as well. So it's a great resource for that as well. So yeah, do keep thinking about them, and as Joe said, do keep asking questions, and feel free to let us know. Or we've just had one more quick question just come in, Joe. Sonia's asking, on the sample of this survey, was it based on ACCA members only?
Yes, thank you, Sonia. Apologies, I hadn't seen that. Yes, so it wasn't exclusively ACCA members, so we went out to sort of quite a wide range of people, stakeholders really. So it was students, members, people in the profession who are not ACCA members. We didn't quite have as big a reach outside the profession itself, so it really was a survey of people in the profession. But that was kind of the scope on this occasion. But again, we're really excited to have so many responses in the UK and so many globally, over 8,000 globally. But that is something we're seeking to grow and further extend our reach with the forthcoming edition. And indeed, we'd be grateful for all of your support in that, because we will have an open survey link which will be available on social media and things. So if anyone's able to share that forward when the time comes, we'd be hugely grateful for your support.
Okay, well, thank you. And on that note, I'll let everyone return to the rest of their day, and hopefully you're able to join us for the other session that we've got planned later today as well. So do look out for those, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you there. Thanks, everyone. Bye.